Chapter 9. It was the great day of shooting the dance act. They were determined to complete the act in about 12 hours of continuous shooting, starting at 6 in the evening.
The studio was stirring into tremendous activity. On the floor of stage A gorgeous Kailash was standing. The background of ice peaks was painted by the art department. All the previous night and throughout the day Ravi had sat up there and painted it. Foliage, cut and propped up, stood around.
Shiva, with his matted hair and a cobra around his neck, sat there in the shade of a tree in meditation. DeMello, script in hand, was roving about giving instructions. The sound van outside was all ready to record.
Assistants stood around, fingering switches and pushing up screens and running to and fro. The makeup assistant constantly ran forward and patted the cheeks of the artists. DeMello stepped on the trolley, put his eye to the camera and cried, "Light, 4, 7, baby, 17.
As Shiva sat there in the full glare of several lights, Parvati came up to him from a side wing. Sampath grew excited at the sight of her. Sohan Lal, Somu and Sampath sat up in their canvas chairs and viewed her critically.
Sampath cried, "Shanti, move on a little more gradually," and she adjusted her steps. He ordered a makeup assistant, "Push away that lock of hair on her forehead, so that it doesn't dangle right in the center." He tilted his head to one side and surveyed her as the assistant went up to carry out the instruction.
Somu murmured, "Yes, you are right. If the hair is too artificially made up, it spoils the effect." Sampath went to the camera and applied his eye to the viewfinder.
He stood there, looking for a long time at Shanti, and murmured, "I think you had better remove the foliage behind her." He took his eye from the finder so as to enable DeMello to view her. He stood there for a long time and said, "It's okay now," making some adjustment with the camera.
He went up the stage to readjust the branch of a tree. "Yes, we shall have a final rehearsal now," said Sampath. "Ready?" he cried.
Lights were wheeled about. He looked at them with bored indifference. As they were getting into position he went over and spoke a few words to Shanti, while she remained standing at her post.
"Do you want a chair?" he asked her, and carried a chair for her. "How long am I to keep like this?"
she asked complainingly, and he said, "This is the final rehearsal. We will take it, just one more rehearsal." She made a wry face and sat down.
Beads of perspiration stood on her pink-painted face. Sampath beckoned to an assistant and had her face dabbed as she sat motionless like a piece of lumber. "Can I have an iced drink?"
"Oh, no." He threw up his arms in alarm. "No ice for you till this is over, not for the entire season."
She looked agonized on hearing it and made a wry face again and grumbled, "You never give me anything I want, never." Into their banter came the voice of Lord Shiva, who had been asked to sit rigid in a corner and who had been left neglected by everyone. "I want to go out for a moment," he said.
His face was streaming with perspiration, his matted locks and beard were fierce, no doubt, but his eyes were bloodshot with fatigue. He tried to move in his seat. "Don't move," Sampath commanded him.
"You have another rehearsal. It's going to be difficult to focus your place again. My legs are cramped, and I can't sit anymore." "Don't talk back," commanded Sampath.
All the others looked at each other in consternation. "I'm not only talking back, but I'm going out of this." Shiva got up.
Somu felt that he must smooth out the situation, and so said, "Don't get excited, please. Let no one get excited. We must all pull together." Shiva's eyes, real ones, and not the third one on the forehead, blazed with anger as he said, "I've borne this with patience. 5 or 6 days of continuous rehearsals.
Do you want to kill us with rehearsals? And yet you are not satisfied." "Be calm, my dear fellow," said Somu, patting his back, and DeMello on the other side tried to pacify him.
"Leave me alone," cried Shiva in rage. "All this sequence has already been shot, and yet you want to retake it."
"Why? We're not prepared to explain," said Sampath. "You had better read again your contract, particularly with reference to retakes and rehearsals."
"Our agreement is clear on that point. If you talk any further about it, it will go against you, remember." Shiva was not to be cowed so easily.
He said, almost grinding his teeth, "Yes, but an ordinary retake is different. Now you have included 2 songs and a full-scale dance act. It's not in our agreement." Sohan Lal tried to pacify the fighters now in his own way.
We must not quarrel over such small matters. Of course, you take a lot of trouble. We all appreciate it. Every film is a cooperative effort.
Shiva, who tried to follow this conversation in order to find any useful suggestion, was more enraged when he found on analysis that there was nothing in it. He lost his head completely. He came towards the camera and said, "If you pay me another 5,000 rupees, I'm prepared to go through this act, rehearsals and all, otherwise no."
Why should you ask for extra pay, mister? You must not, said Sohan Lal. Why not?
"I'm laboring for it," cried Shiva passionately. "And I am entitled to it." "It is unthinkable," cried Sampath and Somu in one voice.
Not unthinkable in her case, I suppose. Shiva cried, pointing at Parvati, sitting on her chair and fanning herself. Aren't you giving her 5,000 extra?
"Do you think I don't know all that?" He came towards the producers menacingly. Somu shrank back a little. Sampath stepped forward, rolling up his sleeve.
What are you up to? The other checked himself. Sampath asked in a tone of finality, Are you going through this or not?
"I have said my say. Are you going to revise my contract? I don't want conditions."
We may give you more or we may not. Leave all that to our discretion. At the moment I won't have you talk of any such things on the set.
"Are you going to your place or not?" "I'm not." "Very well, get out of here," he thundered.
Give me my salary. I will go, said Shiva, descending from Kailash defiantly. That'll be settled in a court of law. You have violated a contract, and you will have to face the consequences.
"What injustice is this?" cried Shiva, completely losing his head. Sampath told Demelo, take him out of the studio. "I don't want any further indiscipline in this studio," and Demelo assigned a couple of assistants to lead Shiva out.
Sampath subsided in his chair, exhausted by the effort. There remained a strained silence as everybody waited, and top light boys looked down from their platforms, and assistants stood hushed at their posts. Somu was the first to break the uncomfortable silence.
He said timidly, "Well, Mr. Sampath, what shall we do now?" "Leave that to me," Sampath said grandly. "We need not be at the mercy of these mercenaries."
I will do Shiva myself. I've been an actor once. He looked up at the makeup artist and asked, You can make me up for Shiva?
The artist looked at him critically and said, "Yes, sir." "But the dance, sir?" Somu said.
We've bothered our heads with it for 4 days. I always felt that we might do it ourselves, save all trouble instead of trying to teach it to these fools. What do you say, dance master?
"Yes, sir, they do not easily learn." Sohan Lal said, "We must always be ready to do many things." And then he spoke for a long while with Sampath in his Western Indian dialect, and Sampath smiled and said something in reply.
Sohan Lal was perhaps recounting a reminiscence of a similar nature. Sampath went over to Shanti and said, So sorry. Further delay.
"Forgive us, dear. I'll be ready in a moment. You can relax for half an hour in your room while they make me up."
Sometime later when Srinivas came into the studio he was surprised at being greeted by the familiar voice, Hello, editor, don't be shocked. But it came from within a heavy beard and matted locks. Sampath.
"What is the matter?" He wore a tiger skin at his loins. "Well, people do not realize that no one is indispensable in this world," he said and explained the position.
Sampath's versatility took his breath away. We are determined to finish this scene today, even if it is going to mean 24 hours of continuous shooting. You have to wear a cobra around your neck.
Yes, I know. We've got that tame one. I tried it. It is not bad, though it feels unearthly cold at the first touch. Playback.
Sampath shouted presently. Sound. He went over and gave instructions to Demelo, who stood at the camera, and then went to Shiva's seat on Kailash.
A song blared forth from the loudspeaker, a song with a sentimental lilt, and drums producing a kind of hot air rhythm. The music department, fully realizing the need of the hour, had produced a brand new tune by adapting a couple of tunes born in Hollywood from a South American theme. Srinivas despaired on hearing it.
It produced anything but the Holy of Holies feeling that he had hoped would be the essence of the scene. As he saw Somu and Lal tapping their feet instinctively to the music, he was filled with a desperation which he could not easily place or classify. Other feet picked up the rhythm, and presently he saw Sampath slowly stirring in his meditation.
He rose to his feet. He twisted and wriggled his body and assumed the pose of a dance carving one saw on temple walls. He moved step by step and approached the chair, which marked Parvati's place.
"Cut!" rang out the mellow's voice. "This will be the first cut," he explained. Shiva relaxed his rigid pose.
"Call Parvati," he ordered. People went out and returned, followed by Parvati, with her anklets jingling and very modern eardrops swinging on her ear lobes and a crown scintillating on her brow.
She stood there in her place. Once again the cry, music, and all lights and final rehearsals, and lights shot up all around, and Srinivas noted how cunningly they had managed to make her clothes unnecessary by the number. I.O. light, which shot up a beam of illumination from behind her at ground level. What ingenuity! He commented to himself. Her body stood out as if X-rayed, her necklace and diadem glittered and shone and seemed to be the only apparel she wore. Everyone, the principals in canvas chairs, went over to the camera to look through the viewfinder and shake their heads with academic approval. There was suddenly a small discussion on the same academic level. Will the censors pass this? Censors. What have they to object to? It's only artistic. At that rate they should stop all dances and Bharatnatyam, while professors and ministers are clamoring everywhere that we should revive our classical art, another said. Lights off, rang the voice, and switches pit-patted. We will have a final rehearsal and take the first shot afterwards. Music. Music, the South American tune, started once again. Shiva got up from his trance and executed his slow rhythmic steps, but Parvati stood still, and when they questioned her about it pleaded, "No rehearsals are necessary for me. Don't tire me, please." Shiva opened his eyes for a moment to say, "Yes, don't tire her out." "Yes, yes, it is better that you don't tire her out," repeated three more voices, catching the contagion. Everybody seemed to be saying the same thing and feeling the same way. And then they sounded a buzzer and stopped the music. Shiva returned to his place and sat under the tree once again in meditation. He said, "De Mello, get ready to shoot. Call in the extras, Parvati's companions. Fetch the cobra." Lights were once again wheeled about, with their little wheels creaking. Porters moved hither and thither. Assistants took out their long entry books and made notes. Makeup assistants dashed backward and forward. The cameraman and his assistants disposed themselves around the camera like sentries on duty. Someone went up with a tape and measured. Someone else held up an exposure guide over Parvati's nose. Elaborate rites of a very curious tribe, with their own high priests and medicine men. This is really an anthropological specimen, Srinivas thought. His reflections were interrupted by the entry of Ravi at this stage. He came in bearing a portfolio in his hand and was waiting for an opportunity to catch the eye of the art director, who was busy on the set, making some final readjustment to the heavenly background. Seeing Srinivas, Ravi edged up to him and whispered, "I have to get his approval for a design and send it up for block making immediately." "He seems reluctant to get down from yonder heaven," whispered Srinivas, but found no response. Ravi's eye was caught by the figure of Parvati, and he looked hypnotized. Srinivas wanted to jerk him back to his normal state and asked, "What is that thing in your file?" Ravi answered absently, "Design and lettering." "Is it urgent?" "Yes, yes," replied Ravi, without looking at him, with his eye still on Parvati, who was now fanning herself. He stood transfixed. "That is Sampath," he whispered. "See the cobra around his neck." A live cobra was coiled about his throat, where he formerly wore his scarf, and it was making imperceptible gliding movements. Srinivas felt that he must say something to draw away Ravi's attention, searched about for a remark, and could only say, "What a dangerous thing." "It has no fang, unfortunately," remarked Ravi. Srinivas felt that he had made a blunder, and hastened to repair it with some other remark, but all to no purpose. Ravi stood as if transfixed, with his eyes on Parvati and answering in monosyllables. "Srinivas, shall we go to the canteen for something?" "I feel rather parched." "No. I've got to get that fellow's approval." "Ready," went up a cry. A whistle rang out. The extras lined up behind Parvati and Shiva. Silence. Rang out another cry. Lights. All lights.
The lights flashed out, X-raying the dancer once again. Music. Music started.
Start. Silence. The camera was switched on.
Each man was at his post. The music squeezed all sense out of people and only made them want to gyrate with arms around one another. Shiva went forward, step by step. Parvati advanced, step by step. He was still in a trance with his eyes shut, but his arms were open to receive her.
Shanti's brassiere could be seen straining under her thin clothes. She bent back to fit herself into the other's arms. The Mexican melody worked up a terrific tempo.
All lights poured down their brilliance. Scores of people stood outside the scene, watching it with open-mouthed wonder. It was going to be the most expert shot taken.
The light boys looked down from their platforms as if privileged to witness the amours of gods. If the camera ran on for another minute, the shot would be over. They wanted to cut this shot first, where Shiva's arms went round the diaphanous lady's hips.
But it was cut even a few seconds earlier in an unexpected manner. A piercing cry, indistinguishable, unworded, like an animal's, was suddenly heard, and before they could see where it originated, Ravi was seen whizzing past the others like a bullet, knocking down the people in his way. He was next seen on the set, rushing between Shiva's extended arms and Parvati, and knocking Shiva aside with such violence that he fell amidst his foliage in Kailash in a most ungodly manner.
Next minute they saw Parvati struggling in the arms of Ravi, who was trying to kiss her on her lips and carry her off. They soon realized that this scene was not in the script. Cries rang out, "Cut!
Power! Shut down! Stop!"
And several people tried to rush into the scene. Ravi attempted to carry off his prize, though she was scratching his face and biting his hands. In the mess, someone tripped upon the cables and all the lights went out.
Ravi seemed to be seized with a superhuman power. Nobody could get at him. In the confusion, someone cried, "Oh!
Camera! Take care! Lights! Lights! Fools!" Somebody screamed, "The cobra is free! The cobra is creeping here! Oh!"
People ran helter-skelter in the dark. While they were all searching and running into each other, they could hear Ravi's voice lustily ringing out in another part of the studio. And all ran in his direction.
He was presently heard saying, "She has slipped away again. Bring her, do you hear me?" His voice rose and filled the whole place in the dark.
"I'm not to be cheated again. She is," he uttered aloud, "a piece of ribaldry. And if anyone goes near her, I will murder him."
And he let out a whoop of joy and cried, "Ah, here she is." And somebody else cried, "Oh, he has got me," amidst other noises. There was the noise of a struggle in the dark.
Leave me, oh, save me," some extra girl screamed. And the crowd rushed in her direction. In the meantime, 1 or 2 candles were brought in, and by their flickering light, people moved about in the direction of Ravi's voice.
But the moment they came there, Ravi's voice was heard in another part of the building challenging them. In this pale light, Srinivas could be seen trying to follow Ravi and persuade him. Persuade him to do what? Srinivas wondered in the middle of it all.
He was blindly running along with the rest of them, catching the mood of the mob. It was evident that for most people now this was an exciting diversion, though the two who looked maddened and panicky were Sampath and Somu. Sampath had still Shiva's matted locks on his crown, and the tiger's skin girt his loins, but he looked despondent. Even in that feeble light of a single candle, his eyes looked careworn and anxious as he paused to say, "Editor, what is this?
What devil has seized him? We are ruined. Do something."
Stop him. Ravi, like a shadow, was seen racing up a flight of steps. "Oh, he is going into the storage. Stop him, stop him."
Somu's portly figure was hurrying towards the stairs. He was seen going up a few steps, when Ravi turned swiftly on his heel with a war cry and tried to fling himself on him, and Somu, startled beyond description, stood arrested for the fraction of a second, and turned and ran down again at full speed. This was the first time anyone had seen Somu running, and people forgot their main pursuit for a moment in watching this spectacle.
Sohan Lal came up from somewhere, moving along with the general stream of the crowd, and cried into Srinivasa's face, "I should not have given that advance on the picture. Now what is to happen to my money?" Somu was crying, "Sampath!
Sampath!" Pointlessly in the dark. Srinivas felt so dumbfounded by everything that he merely stopped where he was, leaning for rest on one of the creeper-covered shed walls.
Can't you get some more candles? Someone shouted. They are all required near the fuse box.
Which fool is responsible for this? Sampath cried somewhere. Carrying open lamps.
He ordered all the candles to be put out. And utter darkness enveloped them again. De Mello was the only person who seemed to plan the campaign with any intelligence.
He conducted himself as though such things were a part of the ordinary Hollywood training. There is no need to lose our heads over this, he was heard saying again and again. It is only a mishap.
With a handful of picked men from the work section, armed with sticks, he surrounded the block and led the procession up the staircase. He proceeded stealthily, flashing his torch. Not enough torches to go round.
That is our chief handicap. He tiptoed into the top room, as if going into a tiger cage when the tiger was not looking. There was for a moment no sound after he went in.
People down below held their breaths and waited with anxious faces. Presently the door opened and De Mello appeared on the landing and declared, "He is not here." "Not there."
"What do you mean, not there, Mr. De Mello?" De Mello shouted something back and added, "God knows, vanished probably through the window. He has made a frightful mess."
"Come up, please." They hesitated, trying to pluck up courage to go. Sampath moved a step or two, when a man came down.
"Shanti has swooned. She has a cut on her forehead, bleeding." Sampath exclaimed, "Ah!
Ah! Get a doctor," and vanished from the spot. Meanwhile Somu gripped Srinivas's hand and cried, "Please come up and see, sir."
Yes, it is better you come up and see also," added Sohanlal, taking his other arm. Srinivas allowed himself to be steered. There was no need to question the relevancy of any action.
This was not the moment for it. This block contained the laboratory, storage, editing and allied departments, full of shelves, tables, wheels, troughs, all kinds of apparatus resembling an alchemist's workshop. The torch flashed and went out as they examined their surroundings.
Somu cried in despair, "Can't someone get a torch which doesn't go out?" The floor was strewn with broken bottles, chemicals and salt and trailing lengths of film. "Be careful."
Broken glass, De Mello warned. Somu snatched a flashlight, stooped to the floor, picked up a film and held it up. They saw a close-up of Shanti, and farther along Shiva on Kailash, with dirt and scratches on both of them.
"Who left the negatives about so carelessly?" Somu thundered, glaring from his kneeling position on the floor. No one answered.
All questions at this moment were destined to die without an answer. "Well, sir, no one is particularly responsible for this. It's usual to keep the cut negatives in these racks." "Nothing unusual," said De Mello.
Somu grunted and said, "Our loss must be heavy." He felt like saying a few other things, but somehow feared that he might hurt De Mello. He was too cautious even now.
He suppressed many pungent remarks that rose to his lips, and merely said, "Won't someone get a light?" In answer to this they heard a thundering command go forth. "Here! Get Shanti and all her lights."
Somu looked about panic-stricken and cried, "He is here, get the light quick." "Get Shanti lights," echoed the command. De Mello flashed his torch and saw Ravi crouching under a table, his eyes sparkling in the torchlight.
De Mello acted quickly, too quickly even for Ravi. He just stooped, thrust his hand in and pulled Ravi out. Somu shivered and tried to run.
He became hysterical and chattered incoherently. Ravi struggled in De Mello's grip and mumbled, "You are hurting. Love me, darling."
"Love me, darling," he said in a sing-song. "Darling, love me. Love is lust.
Lust is portrait in oils, editor. And all his color of rain. What color is lust?"
In reply to all this, De Mello's left fist shot out, hit him under the chin, and knocked him down flat. The lights were ablaze once again at 5 a.m. The police arrived in a van soon after.
The major part of the next 4 days Srinivas spent in running between the Market Road police station and his home. Ravi's household was in a turmoil. His father was mad with rage, his mother wrung her hands helplessly, and even the little brothers and sisters looked stunned.
After his outburst, Ravi became docile and uncommunicative. He didn't seem to recognize anyone. When Srinivas addressed him through the bars, Ravi would not even turn in his direction.
His look had no fixed point. He kept muttering something to himself under his breath. No one could follow the sense of it.
It sounded like the language of another planet. Srinivas became familiar with the comings and goings of the police station. He saw a policeman pushing in a Jutka driver for some traffic offense. He saw an urchin brought in and sent away with a couple of slaps on his face. He saw a terrified villager brought in for questioning and pushed away somewhere out of sight.
All the while a sergeant sat at a table, implacably writing on brown forms, except when a bulky inspector came in swinging a short cane, when he stood up respectfully and saluted. Ravi sat hunched up in a corner, seeing nothing, hearing nothing, but occupied with his own repetitions. Srinivas carried him food every day in a brass vessel.
He had the lockup opened, went in, sat beside Ravi and persuaded him to eat the food. Ravi seemed to have forgotten the art of eating. Srinivas attempted to feed him with a spoon, but even that was difficult.
He kept a morsel on his tongue and swallowed only when he was persistently told to do so. It was an odd spectacle. Srinivas sitting there in that dark corner beyond the bars, coaxing Ravi to eat, as the market road babble continued outside.
Sampath came on the evening of the fourth day and stood watching the scene through the bars. He had a few scratches on his face and he limped slightly, otherwise there was no sign of the recent events. He still wore his smart silk shirt and gold studs.
He stood watching silently till Srinivas finished the feeding and came out. Sampath said with a sigh, "It was an evil hour that brought me and Ravi together. I never knew that a fellow could go so mad."
"Won't you come out? Let us sit in the car and talk." Srinivas followed him to the car outside.
Sampath opened the door and sat down in the driver's seat with Srinivas beside him. It was 5 in the evening, and traffic rolled past them. The babble of the marketplace kept a continuous background to their talk as Sampath said, "I couldn't see you for 3 or 4 days, Mr. Editor.
There has been so much to do, mainly checking up the damage. Why should a thing like this happen to us?" Srinivas remained silent, feeling that an answer was beyond him.
Sampath said with the air of a martyr, "I've only been trying to do him a good turn and yet. You know our losses? Must be heavy," Srinivas said casually, determined to discourage martyrdom at all costs. "Damage to the settings, chemicals, lights, films exposed, and so on. We shall have to retake several shots."
It is amazing how much havoc one man could do within an hour. It will be days before we set the studio right again. More than all this, Shanti.
She is so much shaken that she will be unfit for work for many weeks. She swore she would never come near the studio again. I couldn't mention the word, studio, without her getting hysterical.
This would have been our greatest blow, but thank God, since yesterday she has grown calmer. I know I can manage her. She needs complete rest before she can return to work.
But I'm sure she will be all right, and we will complete the film yet. Not 100 Ravis can stop us from doing our work. Well, you will see us all up and doing once again.
I'm sorry, though, to see that boy there, but I always felt he was not quite sound. I wanted to see you about him, too. Will you withdraw your complaint?
He should be in a hospital, not in prison, pleaded Srinivas. But, Sampath hesitated. He will not come near you or the studio.
I will guarantee you that. Somu has lost his head completely. He is dead set on pursuing the matter.
You had better explain to him how silly it will be and that he will gain nothing by it. Please withdraw your complaint. You will not be troubled by him.
I will see to it. You can do it on behalf of the studio. I promise I will ask nothing else of you in life.
He pleaded so earnestly that Sampath got down without a word, approached the sergeant, spoke to him and left with him a letter for the inspector. "It is done, sir," he said, getting back into his seat in the car. "I only came to say goodbye."
We are going to Mempi Hills tomorrow. Why Mempi Hills, of all places? It has a fine rest house and it is a quiet place.
I'm sure a couple of weeks' stay there will immensely benefit Shanti. His car moved off. Srinivas watched him go.
A vast sigh of despair escaped his lips, at the irrepressible inevitable success that seemed to loom ahead of Sampath. God alone can rescue him, he muttered to himself as he saw the car turn into Alaman Street. The inspector came down an hour later.
He said, "Well, you can take your friend home. I am glad they have withdrawn the complaint. What can we do with mentally defective people?
It is like dealing with drunkards. We keep them in custody for 3 or 4 days and then send them off. If kept longer, they prove a bother to themselves and to us.
Srinivas walked into the cell and persuaded Ravi to leave with him. The inspector followed them to the door. He said, I used to read your banner with great interest.
What has happened to it? This was a piece of encouragement from a most unexpected quarter. Srinivas stood arrested like a man recovering a lost memory.
Traffic was passing. Policemen were walking in and out with their boot nails clanking on the hard stone floor. Why, what's the matter? Asked the inspector, turning the little stick in his hand. No, nothing, Srinivas replied.
All the jumble of his recent months came in a torrent. Sampath, the press, film, rotary, linotype, each struggling to be expressed and jostling the other out. Srinivas stood looking at the point of light in the inspector's belt buckle, which caught a ray of light from the shop opposite.
Ravi, his hair ruffled, his dress dirty and loose, stood beside him mutely. Srinivas felt that he himself had stood mute too long, and some answer from him was overdue. But he found himself tongue-tied.
He felt he had been involved in a chaos of human relationships and activities. He kept saying to himself, I am searching for something, trying to make a meaning out of things. The inspector kept looking at him, half amused and half puzzled.
The groan of a man in custody was feebly heard. The implications of the banner and all that it stood for flashed across Srinivas's mind for a brief second. He said desperately, imploringly, if I had a press I could start it tomorrow. The inspector said, what has happened to the press you were doing it in?
Once again he felt it impossible to speak. He struggled for expression. He overcame the struggle with a deliberate effort and said, Sampath, you know he is no longer a printer. No, he is no longer a printer, I know.
I can't get anyone else to print my work, said Srinivas, and felt like a baby talking complainingly. It sounded to him silly and childish to be talking thus at the police station gate. If you will come here any time tomorrow evening, I will take you to the Empire Press, who will print for you.
He is a good printer and will oblige me. We must revive your weekly. It used to be interesting, said the inspector.
Srinivas gripped his hand in an access of inexpressible gratitude. Please, he implored. I'll be here tomorrow at 11 positively.
He drew his arm through Ravi's and led him along through the crowded market road. A bus hooted, country carts tumbled by, villagers passed along with loads on their heads. But Srinivas felt that he had got back his enchantment in life. He chatted happily as he walked along. Ravi, something to keep me sane, absolutely, without the banner.
Well, you will be well enough again, and then you can draw dozens of pictures for our paper. It will be your own paper, he said and looked at the dull, uncomprehending eyes of Ravi, who walked beside him like a lamb, his lips muttering some unknown chant under his breath. They walked on a few paces thus, silently, on the edge of the road, avoiding and pushing their way through the groups of people going in the opposite direction.
Srinivas slackened his pace and whispered, Don't you worry any more about Sampath or anyone else. They all belong to a previous life. He looked up at the other as he said it. A feeble ray of understanding seemed to glow in Ravi's eyes. That was enough for Srinivas.
His heart was filled with joy and he forgot all else in the relish of this moment.